when they were singing that song, and realizing that that applies to every single one of us on a different level, because we know what we've done in our lives. We know the things. When the line came, there's things I wish I hadn't done. There's things I've seen that I wish I hadn't seen. I was looking all around the room, realizing that story is different for every single one of us, but it applies to every single one of us. So they did a great job on that song. I also want to mention something else that I noticed this morning, which I've never really picked up on this before. Our music group up here, the drums, the guitars, piano, everything up here, all the instruments, they do a fantastic job with that music. But then I zoned in on one thing this morning. You got Emily and Kim standing right here, singing. But they're not just singing the lyrics of the song. You look at those two when they sing, they are in love with Jesus Christ and they are worshiping Him up here. So I was watching that aspect of what we were doing this morning. I'm like, hold on, I'm going to need a second. Not because it's nothing that different than they normally do. It's just, you can tell they're not just up here singing and filling a gap. They're up here singing to God, and they love God. So thank you guys. It's not an instrument per se, but it's the finest quality of what we do up here is the worship aspect of it. So I think it's fantastic. What we have going on here at Renew is amazing. In every ministry around the building, everything that we do, behind the scenes, all of it, there's a love for God and a love for people in this church, and I'm thankful that I get to be part of this. If you'll turn in your Bibles to 1 Samuel chapter 17 this morning, I'm going to tell you I am going to build a huge front porch this morning before we get into the structure of what I'm preaching about. I mean, a long front porch. And if you go ahead and go back, I'm not ready for the verse yet. Yeah, we'll just hold out there for a second. So, and also, I want to point out another thing that we're doing around here. Zach stepped forward, and be careful when you step forward saying, hey, I'd like to do something, because chances are I will find that. There in the sound area, Dan is our youth pastor, and he devotes his time to those teenagers, and sometimes that can overlap as far as one service to the other. So Zach has volunteered to come up here and take over the sound system back there. I am going to put him through rigorous testing this morning with what we're doing on the screen. So understand that I am putting a lot on him for his very first day back there, but Zach, thank you for what you're doing. I'm going to build a huge front porch before we get into the structure of the message this morning. The message is short, but it takes a lot of build-up to get there. So stay with me. We're going to go through a lot of scripture this morning. The mindset of a hero is an amazing thing. If you look at the heroes, firemen, police officers, when we see the news and we watch these people who we consider heroes, you look at the mindset of a hero, and that's an incredible thing. They move into danger in spite of the fear that they are experiencing. That doesn't mean they're not afraid. It means their courage is not the absence of fear. It's moving in spite of the fear. You're still afraid, and they still move forward because they see the need is greater than their personal loss. That's the mind of a hero. They move forward because they understand and what might happen to me. The loss that happens to me isn't even comparable to what needs to be done. They do not do it for the glory, but for the cause. So many times we hear them say things like, I didn't do anything that anyone else wouldn't have done. Have you ever heard that? And they say, oh, I didn't do anything anybody else wouldn't have done. But the truth is they did what most people wouldn't have done. If we be honest about it, they did what most people wouldn't have done. They don't see their actions as heroic. They see them as necessary. They're not trying to do anything great. They just see the need, and they're moving forward to fulfill the need because it's necessary. True heroes are sacrificial, and they make it their personal mission to advance the greater good. That's the heart of a hero. They're not doing it for any glory. They're doing it because it's necessary that it gets done, and it's for a good cause. And they're going to do it for that. Even if their actions are going to bring about their death, their prayer is that their actions launch the cause even farther. That's what they want to see happen by what they're doing. Today I would like to bring a 17-year-old boy to the surface of the message because of the fact that he had the heart of a true hero. This guy in the Bible at 17 years old is remarkable to me. But he had the heart of a true hero. I also want to point out that we typically look at his story all wrong. we've done it for years. And I would also like to show how I believe he would prefer us look at this story. So I want to go through this story on a different, not a different level, but with a different spin to it here. 1 Samuel 17 gives us the actual account of the popular story of David and Goliath. David is a 17-year-old teenager who loves God and is completely sold out to Him. Loves God. But he runs into a situation that's confusing to him. The Philistine army has come up against Israel and has issued a challenge. That's leading up to where we're going to read here in 1 Samuel 17. The Philistine army has showed up. They've offered a challenge, and now we're going to see the story open up in verse 1 here. It says, "Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, and were gathered to Soko, which belongs to Judah. They encamped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes-Dammim, and Saul and all the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spearhead weighed 600 shekels, and a shield bearer went before him. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourself, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. And the Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all of Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid." Now Goliath is a man that stands between 9 and 11 feet tall. When it says a cubit, the measurement was from the tip of your finger to your elbow. That's what a cubit is. Well, that's a roughly 18 inches, roughly. But depending on whose arm you're measuring, we have a man that's standing now between 9 and 11 feet tall. This is a huge person. He's a remarkable human being. He's openly defied the armies of Israel, and he's challenged them to do something about it. He just said right there, I defy the armies of Israel. Now let's do something about it. One of you come out here and do something about it. Now he's fully trained and armed for battle. This guy has everything he needs. He's been trained for a long time. He's got all this armor that we just read about. You look at the helmet and the spear and the shield and the javelin. He's got everything, a coat of mail. He's got all this stuff going on for him, and he's well prepared. In verse 33 of this chapter, we see King Saul mention this to David after David volunteers to fight Goliath. Let's look at verse 33. Samuel 17:33, it says, And Saul said to David, You are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. To top it all off, Goliath isn't the only man on the field. Let's look at verse 7 here. It says, And a shield bearer went before him. Now that's a detail we overlook a lot of times, but we got 3 guys on the field here. Goliath has been training his whole life for this kind of situation, and he's fully protected. David is a 17-year-old shepherd boy with no armor at all. And the odds seem a little bit uneven. When we look at the description of Goliath and what he's wearing and his spear and the weapons that he has, then you look at David, he's a 17-year-old shepherd boy, it seems a little unfair. Just slightly unfair. Now here's where David runs into the situation that confuses him. David was bringing supplies to his 3 brothers who were in Israel's army. He's bringing supplies to his brothers, and while he's out there, the confusion sets in. Let's look at the next verse in 1 Samuel 17:22. It says, And David set his supplies in the hands of the supply keeper, ran to the army, and came and greeted his brothers. Then as he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines. And he spoke according to the same words. So David heard them, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were dreadfully afraid. At 17 years old, David got to see the condition of God's people in all of their glory. They all fled from Goliath, and David can't understand why. He's a little bit confused. Why is everybody running away from this one guy? Sure, he's 9 to 11 feet tall. He's a pretty good-sized guy. And yes, he's fully armored. It's just one guy. Now the whole army of Israel is running away. So David starts asking some questions. He's a little bit confused. Why is everybody running that way when the one guy steps out and challenges us? Let's take him down. What are we doing? Why are we running away? So he asks a few questions. Let's look at verse 26. It says, Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? Now you got this 17-year-old boy standing out in the field. He's like, I've got some questions, guys. Everybody's running away from him. What happens to the guy who takes him down? And who does he think he is that he should defy the armies of the living God? 17-year-old boy. Let's not forget the scenario here. We've got Goliath, a man of war, and we got a 17-year-old shepherd boy. That's our scenario. And he's trying to figure out why nobody's rising to the challenge, and who does this Goliath guy think he is that he should defy the armies of the living God? Just a couple questions he's got there. And it's easy to understand why David has a problem with what he's seeing here. I've got an issue. I don't know what's going on, guys, and I want somebody to explain it to me. David is watching hundreds of men sitting in the safety of their own troops, and they are all waiting for someone else to make a move. Now that's a proud moment right there. David gets to see Israel in all of their glory. Nobody's going out to fight this guy. We're all in the safety of our own troops, and everybody's waiting to see somebody else make the first move. Pretty valiant team here we got going on. This is a pretty impressive group of men. Meanwhile, God is being mocked and God's people are being humiliated. 17-year-old kid wants to know what's going on. Somebody explain this. While David is speaking to the soldiers, his oldest brother ends up walking onto the scene, and his oldest brother confronts him. Let's look at verse 28. It says, Now Eliab, his oldest brother, heard when he spoke to the men. And Eliab's anger was aroused against David, and he said, Why did you come down here? And with whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and the insolence of your heart, for you have come down to see the battle. Eliab starts chewing David out for showing up just to see the train wreck. I know why you showed up, David. You're here so you can see the battle. You came down to see the train wreck. That's what you came down here for. And he says, the pride of your own heart, go back and watch your sheep, David. Just get out of here. I know why you're here. Now, David hears this confrontation from his oldest brother, and David stands up to his brother and reminds him of the bigger picture. Look at verse 29 with me. It says, And David said, What have I done now? Is there not a cause? Just one statement. Is there not a cause? From the 17-year-old kid to the oldest brother of his family. Like, is there not a cause? Right here, David shows the heart of a hero. See, the cause is greater than his need for protection. David understands what's going on. While everyone else is hiding, David is reminding them of who they are and what is really important. It's a little humbling coming from the 17-year-old teenager when you got a whole army of people that should be doing something about this problem, and everybody's hiding, and the 17-year-old comes up and says, Hey, don't we have a cause here? Isn't there a cause? Everybody, isn't there a cause? And I can just imagine the group of people standing there looking at this guy. Like, what's the shepherd boy preaching for? What's the shepherd boy doing here? We're in the middle of a battle. What's this 17-year-old kid doing? And he's actually delivering a message that every one of them should be saying themselves. Is there not a cause? This is God's army, and they cannot forget the cause for which they stand. And David's trying to get that message out. This is God's army, guys. We're supposed to be standing for God. And nobody's doing anything. Okay, so now we're going to use the one thing led to another approach. You know how those stories go? You know, and then one thing led to another, and then we move on to the story. Because there's a lot of stuff that happens between this point and where I'm trying to get in the message. So here we go. So one thing led to another, and David ends up going to the field, onto the field where everybody else is afraid to go. So we just kind of sped up the story. Now we're farther in, and one thing led to another. Here we are. Now David is going out onto the field, and he's going to go where nobody else is willing to go. 17-year-old is now in the middle of the picture here. When Goliath steps onto the field, his anger begins to rise. Goliath is angry not because somebody stepped out, because that's what Goliath has been asking for the whole time. Send a man out. He's upset with the man who steps out. You got a 17-year-old shepherd boy coming out on the field to face this mighty warrior. And Goliath is a little bit upset about this. Let's look at verse 41. So the Philistine came and began drawing near to David. And the man who bore the shield went before him. And when the Philistines looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was only a youth, ruddy and good-looking. So the Philistine said to David, "Am I a dog that you come to me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, "Come to me, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Now that's not nice. That seems a little bit harsh right there. Come here, boy, and I will give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. That's no way to make friends. Okay? So Goliath is clearly upset with David. He despises the fact that this 17-year-old shepherd boy just stepped out on the field. He's been, for such a long time, he's been saying, "Send somebody worthy to fight me out here." And here he comes. 17-year-old shepherd boy. Like, "I am going to feed your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Well, there you go. That makes a good first impression. Goliath was insulted that the Israelite army just sent out a kid to take on a mighty man of war. Like, why in the world did they do that? So he questions their move, and then he threatens to give David's carcass, feed the birds with it. So Goliath is upset, and David is still a 17-year-old shepherd boy. They're not armed with anything. He's got a slingshot. That's what he's got. He's got a slingshot, but other than that, he's not armed at all. Now, before we go any farther, I want to point out that there were 3 men on the field: Goliath, David, and Goliath's shield bearer. God did not put this detail in here by accident. I just threw that in there to provoke thought. Now back to the story. So look at David's response to what Goliath said. Goliath says, "I'm going to take your carcass, and I'm going to feed it to the birds and the beasts of the field." Okay. So look at David's response to this in verse 45. It says, "Then David said to the Philistine, 'You come to me with a sword, with a spear, and with a javelin. But I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you.'" Now that's a little bit daring right there. Remember, what does David have? He's got a slingshot. Nothing else. Now I'm going to take your head off. 17-year-old boy, shepherd boy, I'm going to take your head off. Let's continue. Verse 46, it says, "This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and I will strike you and take your head from you. And this day I will give the carcasses of the camp of the Philistines to the birds of the air and the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel." Now this kid just stepped out. Nobody, remember, we've got an entire military not willing to step out on the field and face Goliath. David comes up and says, "Don't we have a cause? Is there not a cause?" Now David's the one that steps out on the field to face Goliath. Goliath sees him and says, "I cannot believe you sent out a shepherd boy to take me down." He says, "I'm going to feed you to the birds." And David says, "Hold on. You defied the armies of the living God. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to take your head off. And I'm going to feed the carcasses of your army to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Seems a little bit much, David, shepherd boy. Seems a little big for this scenario. But David's fully confident. He's out there with all the confidence in the world big statement, little guy, fully armed man, slingshot. That's what we got. That's our picture here. Now watch this. He just tells Goliath, the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel when I do this, Goliath. Now watch this. David then turns everything around and points to the downfall of God's people. Look at verse 47. Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. Now he's referring back to the assembly who has done nothing to take Goliath down. So now David's preaching to two different sides. He's telling the Philistines, you will lose this battle, and this assembly is going to know that there is a God who does not fight with sword or spear, but the battle is the Lord's, and you will lose. The Philistines were not the only ones who needed to be taught about God here. God's people were in the wrong also. And the kid comes out to preach an incredible message to both sides. David was about to make a point to every person on the field that day, and he was going to make a big statement with a small rock. Seems a little bit much. A little bit much. Both sides need to see God on display. The Philistines were defying God, and the Israelites were forgetting God. And David shows up to make a point to both sides. Both sides needed to see that the Philistines came with a sword and a shield. David said that he came in the name of the Lord. And that's it. He didn't even bring up the slingshot. He didn't say, I come in the name of the Lord and with my slingshot. No, he didn't even bring up the slingshot. He says, you came with a sword and a spear. You have your shield and everything. But I came in the name of the Lord. See, the name of the Lord is the honor, the authority, and the character of God. His name is who he is. It's his reputation. David says, I came fully armed with that. That's all I've got, but I came with that. David came to defend the family name. I am part of the family of God, and I'm going to defend the family name. You came with all this armor, but I came in the name of the Lord. I came to defend the family name. David just stated that all the Philistines had was fully armored men of war from head to toe, sword, shield, spear, skill, might, soldiers, armor bearers. But David had God's honor and cause. Like, yeah, you got all this, but that's all you have. Me and my slingshot, we came in the name of the Lord. So we're more equipped than you are. Let's look at Goliath's response to the fact that this 17-year-old shepherd boy just told him that he was going to kill him and feed his body to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field. Look at verse 48. 1 Samuel 17, verse 48. It says, So it was when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David hurried and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. Then David put his hand in his bag and took out a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in his forehead, so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. That was a pretty abrupt ending to the story right there. It's just over. David is now... Let's look at the details here. A highly trained soldier and a teenage shepherd boy start running towards each other in the middle of a field. David pulls out a stone from his bag and he slings it at Goliath and kills him. Let's consider the amount of training that each man had for this encounter right here. Goliath is fully equipped to take down his opponent, completely ready for this. David was decent with a slingshot, but even on a good day, it would be difficult to hit your target on the first try while you're running across the field at him. That would be tricky. And a lot of times we don't look at that detail, but David's in a full-out run when he kills Goliath. You might take a couple shots even if you're good, but that's going to be tricky to get him in the first try. There's one major difference between these two men. Goliath came out to be the champion of this battle, and David did not. There's the difference. The story goes on. If we read the story and go on, I didn't put the verses up here, but David ends up running up to Goliath and taking Goliath's sword and cutting off Goliath's head. And we know what happens to the body after that. David's been very clear of what's going to happen to Goliath's carcass. The story's over, though. 17-year-old boy just ran out, grabbed a rock from his back, threw it at Goliath. Goliath hits the ground and he cuts his head off. Story's over. That's it. The battle's done. The difference is Goliath came out to the field to be the champion for the Philistines. David did not come out to the field to be a champion for anybody. You see, there were four people on the field at the time Goliath was killed. There were 2 champions and 2 armor bearers. Goliath was the champion of the Philistine army, and his shield bearer went before him. We read that a couple times. There was a shield bearer before Goliath. God was the champion of the Lord's army, and David was simply the shield bearer who went before him. A lot of times what we do is we look at the story of David and Goliath and we see David as a champion. David never came out to be a champion. He came out to be an armor bearer. He didn't have anything with him but a slingshot, and he didn't even advertise the slingshot. He said, I came to honor him, the champion who's behind me. I'll be the armor bearer. I will carry the armor of the Lord. But he's the champion. I'm not the champion. There were 2 armor bearers on that field, and there were 2 champions on that field that day. Goliath was seen by the Philistines as a demigod. If you look at their culture, they see Goliath as a demigod. He was huge. They worshipped him. They sent Goliath out to conquer Israel for the Philistines. Like, well, you got your God and your armor bearer, and we've got our God and his armor bearer. And David did not go out there to be the champion. He just went out there to carry the shield. That's all he wanted to do. He just wanted to be the armor bearer. Let's look one more time at what David said in verse 47. 1 Samuel 17:47. It says, Then all this assembly shall know that the Lord does not save with sword and spear. This was not David's fight. He said the battle is the Lord's. This was not David's fight. This was God's battle, and God was the champion of that battle. David just bore the shield. That's David's job. So let's look at what the shield is in the army of the Lord. Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 16. Let's look at that verse. Above all, taking the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one. The shield of faith. Take on the shield of faith. David wasn't trying to take any glory in this battle. He was constantly trying to give it to the Lord. All the way through the story, I want to give God the glory. All David wanted to do was be found faithful. That was it. He wanted to hold on to the faith and advance the cause of Christ. You got a kid here with the true heart of a hero. It's not about him. He's thinking, I'm not doing anything that anybody else couldn't have done. Everybody else should have done it, but nobody else did. So David went out and held the shield of faith. He says, I will remain faithful to the champion. And this battle is the Lord's. It's not mine. It's the Lord's. David rose up that day and made sure that both armies understood the cause. He made statements like, who is he that he should defy the armies of the living God? Right then we give God the glory. He said, is there not a cause? He said that he was going to kill Goliath so all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And he wanted to make sure that the assembly of Israel knew that the Lord does not save with sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he was the one who was going to give them victory. He made all of these statements. Back to God. Focus. Back to God. Back to God. Back to God. I'm just going to carry the shield of faith. God's the one that's going to kill Goliath. I'm going to grab out my slingshot and I'm going to throw the rock. God will take the rock where it needs to go. Because this is not my fight, and I am not a champion. David's cause was to magnify God. He was not trying to get the glory, but he was trying to make sure that God received the glory. All the way through the story. It was important for the world to know that there was a God in Israel. And even if nobody else was going to do it, even if he had to do this all by himself, he had to go it alone, God was going to be glorified by his people. Even if David had to be the only one that did it, God was going to receive the glory through his people. David wasn't trying to be a champion. He was trying to be faithful to the champion. That's all David was doing that day. He didn't come out there and say, Goliath, you should see my mad skills. You should see what I can do with a slingshot. He didn't go out there and advertise. He didn't even tell Goliath there was a slingshot in the mix. He says, you came out with sword and shield, and I came out in the name of the Lord. That's all I've got. While everyone else was worried about themselves, David couldn't get his mind off of how deserving God was to be magnified in this situation. 17-year-old kid understood something that nobody else could grasp that day. God is deserving of everything we can give him, and he should be magnified. So he held tightly to the shield of faith and took a stand when nobody else would. See, David had a dynamic message for God's people that day. Live in a way that lets the world know that there is a God and that you are holding the shield of faith for him. That's an incredible message. Let the world know that there is a God and you are going to remain faithful to him because he's worthy and there is a cause. It's easy to be a Christian inside the church building because there is no competition. Think about that for a second. Did you have a hard time singing today? Was it difficult to bow your head and pray? Are you having a hard time opening the Word of God and looking into the Word of God this morning? It's not real difficult, is it? It's easy to be a Christian inside the church building because there's no competition. Everybody else is doing the same thing. It's much harder when you are surrounded by people who do not see the cause. It's harder when you walk outside and everybody is defying our living God. It's harder to pray in public, maybe just to thank God over your food. Just thank him for your food. Sometimes it's hard to do that because there's competition. Nobody else is doing it, so I don't want to stand out. I don't want to be different. I don't want them to see me this way. Sometimes it's hard to tell somebody about Jesus Christ because what if they think I'm weird? What if things go wrong and they make fun of me? It's easy to talk about God and praise God inside the church building, isn't it? It's super easy in here because everybody else is doing it. There's no competition. But it's much harder when you walk out there and nobody else will do it. Nobody else will do it. Thousands of men were on the scene that day, but only one was committed to the right cause. You see, everyone has a cause. The question is, what is that cause? Everyone in this room, everyone listening online, knows they have a cause. There is a cause for every one of our lives, but the question is, what is that cause? So let's play a game. Let's go ahead and get this thought out here. If you were to take a common thread and weave it through every aspect of your life, what would be determined as the cause for which you live? If we could take a thread, common thread, and weave it through every aspect of your life, at the end of it, what would be that common thread through every aspect of your life? What would be determined as your cause? Let's start here. Begin weaving it through your church life, then through your family life, and into your work environment. Now wind it around your friendships, your TV shows, your hangouts, and your hobbies. Let's keep it going a little farther. Finally, wrap it around your relationship with Christ. Take that thread and let's go through all these areas and then wrap it around your relationship with Christ. And when looking at the common thread, what is the cause that it reveals? Let me say that in another way. If someone were to look at your life in each one of these areas, would they determine that you are living to glorify Christ in each of them? Would they be able to look at you and say, yes, they're holding the shield of faith? In every aspect of their life, when that thread goes all the way through every aspect, that person is a child of God. Every aspect of your life, if you were to take it through there, wind it through all of them, would somebody be able to say, yes, that person is faithful to Jesus Christ? If the answer would be no or I don't know, we've got a problem. Same message that David was trying to give that day. You see, David determined that his answer to that question would be yes. Yes, they will know that I hold the shield of faith for God. They will know where I stand. In each area of his life, he wanted the world to know that there was a God in Israel. Is that your desire also? That in every aspect of your life, the world may know that there is a God in St. Joseph, Missouri, or in Elwood, or Wathena, or wherever you live. Is that your desire also, that the world may know that there is a God right here? When our lives are over, what will be the cause that people will remember us standing for? When it's over, say, oh, that person, what would be their cause? If somebody were to ask, what do you think their cause was during their life? What do you think they would say? What was the cause that you lived for? You see, God is ready to show himself strong on the behalf of every single one of you. He wants to do that. Look at 2 Chronicles chapter 16 and verse 9. It says, for the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show himself strong on behalf of those whose heart is loyal to him. Are we loyal to him? If you were to take that thread and wind it through every aspect of your life, would the conclusion be they are loyal and faithful to God? Your TV shows, the place you hang out, your work environment, how you act at work, how you act at church, how you act at home. You take that thread and go all the way through, would the person be able to say, let me tell you what their cause is. Their cause is to honor and magnify God in every aspect of their life. Would that be said of you? Would that be said of me? It's a good question to ask. There is a cause. God didn't just let your existence happen without his knowledge. He knew when you were created. You know how he got the inside scoop on that? He created you. He knew when you were created, and it wasn't just because there needed to be more people on the earth. He created you with a purpose. You have a cause. God is great. Man is lost. Christ is the answer. What are we doing? Just break it right there. Break down right there. God is great. Man is lost. Christ is the answer. What are we doing? Is there not a cause? Is there not a cause? Is the world dying without Jesus Christ? Yes. What are we living our life for? Isn't there a reason why God created us? Isn't there a greater purpose than what we're doing in our life? Is there not a cause? God is great, man is lost. Christ is the answer. What are we doing? What are we doing? Shouldn't God be evident in the lives of his people? I think that's the answer is yes, and everybody knows that. Yes, God should be evident in the life of his people. See, David understood something that day that we should all listen to and understand as well. God gave everything to save David. God loved him when he didn't have to. God was good to him even though David was unworthy of God's goodness. And David was a sinner, and God could have turned his back on him, and he would have been justified in doing so. But he didn't. And David knew that. And it was David's complete honor to live his life for God. A God who would do that, it is my complete honor to lay down my life for him and to serve him in any capacity I can. It is my honor to serve God. The same God has done the same thing for us. If God turned his back on us, he would be justified in doing so because we are all sinners. He would be justified in doing it, but he doesn't. And he sent his son to die for us so that we could be saved and we didn't have to die and go to hell. Same God, same act for us. David said, it is my honor to live in every aspect of my life. Take the thread and go all the way through, and when you are done, the conclusion will be there is a cause, and David held the shield of faith for that cause. That's what David's goal was. Now let's go ahead and put ourselves in the scenario and weave that thread all the way through. Would it be said of you also that the cause was to magnify God through every aspect of your life? Doesn't God deserve everything? Isn't there a cause? He deserves it all. There comes a point in all of our lives where we need to ask the question, what am I living for? You get one life. Live it however you want to. God does give you free will. Live your life however you please. But you only get one of these. You get one life. What am I living for? What are you living for? I think it's a good time to ask that question. What am I living for? In a world where even God's people are waiting for someone else to take a stand, is there not a cause? We cannot be complacent Christians. We can't just Let it happen. I go to church on Sunday. I go to church on Wednesday. Every once in a while, I'll pick up one of those daily bread books and I'll read a devotion out of it. And by the way, these are good things. Keep going. Keep doing them. But is that the conclusion? Is that everything? Is there not a cause? Isn't there a whole army out there that needs to see God magnified in the life of one person? And if nobody else will do it, will you be that one person? Will you be that one? Maybe you're a teenager over here and you say, yeah, I'm not even 17. You know, David was 17. We got to give it to him. You know, he's 17 years old. Or 17. You think, I'm too young. How could I do something for God now? Man, King Josiah was 8 years old when he became king of Israel. Maybe you're thinking, oh, I'm too old. There's no way I could do this. No way God could do anything through my life. Abraham was 100 when Isaac was born. That'll shake your world a little bit. Say, oh, my health isn't good. I can't do anything for God because my health isn't good. Lazarus was dead. And God raised him back from the dead to do something. You're not too far gone. None of us are too far gone. It's not too early. It's not too late. But when our life is over and people look back at our life, if somebody says, could you tell me what they lived for? Could you tell me the core of who they were and what their cause was? What will it be said that it was your cause? What will your cause be? What will people remember you for? I want God with all my heart. I want God to know that I will live my life for Him. And let the world know that there is a God in St. Joseph, Missouri. Even if I got to do something crazy, if God asks me to do something crazy, then by all means, let's go. Let's do it. I'll pray in public. And by the way, you know that's not that crazy. That's not a big thing. But a lot of times we get scared of that idea. I'll go ahead and do that. I'll pray in public. I'll tell somebody about Jesus Christ. I'll invite somebody to come to church. I might not have the answers, but I do know God. And I know He is the answer. And I'll invite somebody. I'll be out there throughout the week, not just on Sundays where it's comfortable to worship God. I will be worshiping God throughout the entire week. Because when my life is over, I want it to be said, He stood for a cause, and the cause was to magnify Jesus Christ and prove Himself to be a child of the living God. In a world that needs salvation so much, in a world that is dying, they're lost, they're dying in their sins, is there not a cause? Stand with me this morning.